because you're not seeing scuffs on the window,
Right.
and so you're making a guess that if somebody had jumped out the window, they were just really careful and didn't scuff the window. But no, this is obviously an information trade because nobody left the building,
Unless the
and there's no
profile,
mud inside the building.
unless right, or unless he's a very small character you're looking for, and the profile fits to where he wouldn't make any scuff marks.
Yeah, that
Right.
too. And so you're making you're starting with a baseline and then making abductive reasoning from what you're not seeing. You're not seeing an individual, you're not seeing a body, so clearly the person is alive or they got out.
Yes. Abductive reasoning.
Yeah.
I've got a definition. The third method of reasoning, abduction, is defined as a syllogism in which the major premise is evident, but the minor premise and therefore the conclusion only probable.
Mhm.
Basically, it involves forming a conclusion from the information that is known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's an extremely educated guess
Right.
because you don't know the answer. And if it's right, then that's proper abductive reasoning. If you're wrong, you're just wrong.
Okay. So deductive reasoning or deduction is making an inference based on widely accepted facts or premises. If a beverage is defined as drinkable through a straw, one could use deduction to determine soup to be a beverage. Okay.
Yeah.
Induction is making an inference based on an observation.
It's much easier to make things out of deductive reasoning,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot easier to make events out of abductive reasoning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or there's induction. It's saying is making an inference based on an observation, often of a sample. Okay.
Yeah. Oh wait, no, yeah, it's not abductive. Yeah, I think inductive. I think that's what Holmes does. It's inductive. Okay. Yeah, you have a sample, and so you're making a guess. So it's like him guessing so many extremely accurate things off of a single thing he sees about you, and suddenly everything else is like comes into picture for him because he saw a little bit of powdered sugar on your, on your pocket. It's just like, oh, okay, so you're a diabetic. Like, well, what do you mean? Like, well, you're in a hospital for high blood sugar, but you keep eating. Like, oh. And it's like, and you're in the waiting room and you never told him you were diabetic. And this is like, oh, how did you get all of that from sugar? It's like, well, you're out of shape. It's like everything lines up from a single thing that he saw. And yeah, well, actually, that was an example from House, which is the medical version of Sherlock Holmes,
yes.
Played by a British actor, and whose best friend is called Wilson instead of Watson. Just like you guys just made medical Holmes. Come on. Holmes, House, really?
Yeah. That's
it's not even subtle.
No.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So is there anything that like jumped out at you for Elder Scrolls? Something
yeah. Like, I mean, from what you said or just from my experience with it?
Your experience.
The relationship between gods and like humans and races, definitely. And how like that was a big one. And then I guess the environments, like the soundtracks, it seemed it worked well with the environments. And like it wasn't too invasive, but it was still
those ones are dynamic.
Right.
So Legend of Zelda kind of played with this with the enemy is nearby sound. that kind of thing. Whenever there was an enemy nearby, you would subtly start hearing this sound. And the closer you got to them, it was dynamic. It would get louder. So, and the longer it would go on, the more intense it would get, because
Right.
obviously, if you're close to them and they're still alive, you have to be getting into a pretty heated battle if that's going on. So they deduced or induced that you would have still been in battle if you're around them too long, and so they would have made the music more excited. But the music in Skyrim or Elder Scrolls goes with the action that's going on.
Right.
Where you get into a battle, suddenly battle music.
Yes.
Where it's not like I'm about to be in a fight or I'm next to an enemy. There's no music. It's just still the environmental stuff. It's the subtle things in the background.
And then fight.
Strike, battle music. And so it's very clear cut dynamic music, but it's still dynamic. It's just not as flowing.
Right.
You're not gonna flow in and out of a lot of that music as well. Like Morrowind is very choppy. It will play the battle music after you're done, but it will kind of end the battle music eventually.
Yes.
Because that's the end of that particular part of the battle music.
Yeah.
But it'll keep going if you're still in battle. But it'll end that part once you're out of battle, but it would have still kept going a little bit longer than usual. Whereas some games have gotten a lot better at that, where they know exactly when the battle is over, and so it'll fade properly. And that usually happens in Skyrim. It'll fade properly.
I remember
choppy in Morrowind.
I do remember Morrowind in games where the battle sound goes on longer than the battle, and it's, you're like sitting there like, where are they?
Yeah.
Where are they?
Well, it also doesn't help that almost everything is trying to kill you in Morrowind.
Yeah, and you don't. Oh yeah. Morrowind was pretty like.
It's intense.
Yeah. It was hardcore in that respect.
It's not exactly player friendly. You really have to grind in that game, and unfortunately, it's not easy to do with friends, because you're all attacking the same thing and you're all leveling up the same things, and it's not leveling as much because you've killed the thing. So it's weird dynamics. But the music in Skyrim had kind of levels, where you would have a certain intensity depending on the type of battle, I think. Where you would, if you're facing like a cave troll or something, or some kind of creature, the battle music isn't as intense. Whereas suddenly you're going against a dragon, I think there had a bit more going on. But I can't recall it that well, because here's a problem with dynamic music, is that depending on how much it fades and crossfades, it can become a soup. And so you might end up with music that fades into another set of music to the degree where you don't know where one starts and the other ends, and you can't differentiate them. And so they're not imprinting. And so suddenly you're not actually getting the music. So a lot of the music in some of the dungeons and stuff, where it was very ambient, I have no idea what was going on there. Like I couldn't hear the dungeon music and say, oh, well, I'm in a Skyrim dungeon.
Yeah, the way I remember it, it was either Skyrim or Oblivion, where it was like it was like the normal music, and then all of a sudden fight that takes 2 seconds, and it was 2 seconds. It was like, yeah, and then it back to like normalcy, like a mud crab crawling towards you.
Yeah. The mud crabs. Oh my gosh, the mud crabs. The mud crabs are even worse in Morrowind because they're so slow and they're trying to attack you from so far away, that you would just hear battle music and you're wondering what's going on, and you leave, and eventually the battle music turns off, and you're like, okay, I don't know what that was about.
Yeah, you're in a town and he's trying to kill you.
Yeah. Well, that's also another issue. That's a gameplay issue where threat detection was very difficult in some of these games, to the degree where threat detection doesn't even work in Daggerfall. So the guards aren't killing everything that's going after you. The guards kill the things that go after them.
So threat detection from other things.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's roughly similar in Morrowind, where if you're chased into a town by some creature, sometimes the guards will attack it. Other times the guards will completely ignore it and just watch you run through town and just call you a name. And it's just annoying.
Yes, we were. Okay, so maybe. So we were talking about dynamic music.
Yeah.
Right? In Elder Scrolls, mostly.
Yeah.
Okay, so what other kinds of music do you see in like games?
In Elder Scrolls?
There's
In
sound.
games? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's soundtracks, there's soundtracks, there's dynamic music, and then there's I would call it thematic, or cutscene music or something like that. I guess I would throw that in with thematic.
Right.
But you have specific music for specific points in time that are fixed in the game.
Right.
Where a lot of it is depending on the environment that you're in. This is event based, and so that tells you exactly what event is happening, and that's also happened a couple of times in Legend of Zelda.
Yes.
Where it will pull in an idea out of the music that you're hearing, and so it's not that you're in a certain place. You can be in a certain place that would normally have a different music, and because a cutscene is going on, you're getting a completely different feeling because this is not supposed to be happening. It's like, so you'll see this a lot when you play Majora's Mask, is the okay, so the clock town itself. The clock town is dynamic and it's dynamic, event-based, and thematic. So it's all of them, because the clock town music, you hear it the whole time. And it just kind of keeps going like that. But as the days progress, as you get to day 2 and day 3, it gets slightly faster and a little bit more unnerving every day. So, because in Clocktown, things are getting a lot more tense.
Right.
And so it feels like something is definitely wrong. And it's definitely wrong because when you look up, there's a moon coming at you. So it's not unusual for someone to say, "Oh, there's something wrong here." Give me a second. So it gets really tense, and that can actually be said for a few places. because I think even the adventure theme that you get from being outside in the world, the general, well, yeah, you know the Avengers theme sounds like. It's like when you're on Hyrule
Dun,
Field in
dun,
Ocarina
dun,
of Time.
dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, the regular one. They
Yes.
have a bit of a twist on that in Majora's Mask, where you're out in the field and it's kind of bouncy, but with the passage of time, that also gets a little bit different.
Right.
I
Right.
think it grows in darkness or something like that.
Yeah.
But and a lot of the music and a lot of the themes in that game are thematic and dynamic.
Right.
And so they played really well with the music. Um, in addition to using music as a tool, I think that's the first game in which I see music used as a tool. Not that one, but those games, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, in which music itself is a tool, because you're playing music to get things to happen. It's the first time I had encountered that um, so prevalently.
Right. Meaning the like ocarina or.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because without it, you can't get through certain things in Ocarina of Time. Literally because it's named after it. But the major thing is how you use that in relation to your in relation to your struggles in Majora's Mask, because the dynamic switches from using tools to using masks. You still get tools, but the masks play a huge part in it, and a lot of the game is collecting these masks, and each of them is unique and different and actually important.
So are the masks like the songs you get in Ocarina of Time? Like there's something, or they're just thinking of them as tools, maybe.
I would attribute them more towards being
Like items.
the medallions.
Right.
But like, imagine the medallions and the gems that you get, but instead of them just being keys, they're tools.
Okay.
You can actually do things with them, and there's a lot more of them.
Okay.
So but some of them aren't required. But if you really want a good ending and you want to make it easier, you want to get every single mask, and that's
Right.
going to be hard because some of them are extremely time based.
Right.
And the number one hardest one is to get is the lover's mask, because you have to go through a specific thing on each day, all 3 days, and actually wait for those things to occur. And so it takes like an hour or something.
Jeez.
Um,
Jeez.
but the masks, no, the music. Let's go back to the music. The music.
I'm
in
cool with either.
Majora's,
Like the masks are really interesting too.
yeah, those are cool. When you play it, we can get deeper into that one. But the music in Majora's Mask is used as a way of manipulating your environment rather directly, because you're using the Ocarina of Time. And so it doesn't just send you through time or send you back 3 days or help you out a little bit if you want to open up a door. It literally can do time stuff, which is like, if you imagine if you had a watch and it could manipulate time, these are the powers you would think it would have. It can slow things down and it can speed things up. And that's it's just 2 settings, but that's extremely powerful in context.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're if you've got something that you need to be precise about, you'll want to slow down time and make sure it happens exactly when you want it to happen, and then intercede, because it's like Back to the Future. You always know when something's going to happen, and you can be right there. And you can, but if there's something that you have to wait for, but it's going to be a few hours, and you can't just skip around and do stuff, you can speed up time. It's double time and half time, and so you're playing the Song of Time twice as fast or twice as slow. And so it's like the twice as fast is like you're like doubling the notes, and the twice as slow one, I can't remember how that one works, but
and this is Majora's Mask.
Yeah, in Majora's Mask, and you're messing with time personally, and nobody else seems to notice, which is funny. But it's like does this seem really long to you, or like you don't hear comments like that, which I kind of wish you did, because that would have been funny. But the here I will bring in the masks. You get three specific changing masks in which you become a Goron or a Deku or a Zora. And it's like clearly the obvious elemental things. You got like the fire and ice and water and earth and plants and that kind of thing going on. But each of them, when you're in that transformation stage, when you pull out the ocarina, it's a completely different instrument. And so when you're Goron and you pull out your ocarina, you suddenly have this big set of drums in front of you, like giant, different sized bongos in front of you, and you're playing the bongos to these songs, and then you'll hear the ocarina rendition played as bongos, no matter what song it is. It's just like, okay, that's really weird, but neat. And so the first time you do it, you'll be a Deku, and it will be completely weird to you because he'll have these pipes, and it's like he's playing this many bell trumpet, and that's kind of wrapping around him, and so it sounds kind of silly, but it all works in the dynamic of the game, because you have to play the music in context of what's going on, to where you playing the bongos for a specific reason when you go interact with the Gorons. And then you play, when you're a Zora, you have this like fishbone guitar. And so you're playing the guitar for a specific reason, and it all makes sense in context, and it all works. And it gets to the point where you end up like playing as a band, as yourself. and I think that's probably the best composition in that game, because a lot of the composition are all kind of rehashed and then reused and then redone and then made slightly darker because it's a darker game. But unfortunately, it like kind of left out some of the older songs, so you can't like relive those. But because the entire construction of Majora's Mask is using all the assets of Ocarina of Time, which is why a lot of the characters and stuff look exactly the same. Because and Nintendo is known for doing this. They will make a game, and then they will use the same assets to make the sequel, because it saves them so much time developing a new game and new graphics and new all this stuff. And so like you can easily just make a sequel after that. That's why a lot of the Zelda games come in twos. And like the Oracle games, where there was supposed to be 3 of them, but they ended up only doing 2.
Okay. That's the game that immediately came to mind when you were like, they come in twos. It's like Oracle of Ages and Seasons.
Yeah, and I don't even know what the third one would have been. It's just like, what other aspect of time is there that you would be able to play with? It's like ages, that's like decades and years and all that stuff. And it's like seasons, like within a year. It's just like, what?
Seconds would have been crazy.
Oracle of every other second. This is like, it's a bit specific.
Yeah.
But yeah, the dynamics of music in video games is a visceral experience that attributes so much to their nostalgia.
Yeah.
Without them, they'd be completely different. They would be simulators. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've actually found that they can like help carry you through a story or help. The nostalgia. I definitely like the town song goes through my head like not super frequently, but frequently enough to where it's
From Ocarina.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that when you play Majora's Mask, the Clocktown song, because of how much you're hearing it, it will just burrow into your brain.
So is that one? Okay, so one thing I want to like get into that I was reading about is the 3 different levels of 3 different kinds of principal kinds of places in Legend of Zelda. Like in all Legends of Zelda, how you have like well, I'll just bring it up now. Like you have it's called like the overland, or like the place you are that covers the whole map. And then
the overworld.
Yes, the overworld. And that's like, when you're in the plains looking out in all directions, right? And then you have the towns and then the dungeons. And I think that's correct. Like those are the 3 principal areas.
Yeah, if you narrowed it down to the dynamic that was introduced through Legend of Zelda 2, Link's Adventure. Ever since then, it's basically been that kind of layout where you've got dungeons or caves and towns and then the overworld. And that's accurate. Yeah. Whereas Legend of Zelda 1 was just overworld, caves, and dungeons.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just think it's cool how they have those like principle, like just that they have that system set up, and like it just seems very solid for a game, like like a very good idea to have something like that. And then I noticed just one thing is I saw in the trailer that you mentioned, the new trailer where there was zombie.
Oh, the second Skyward Sword?
Yes, or the second Breath of the Wild.
Oh yeah, Breath of the Wild. Yeah, that.
And I watched it after I had read about this like overworld thing, and you see Link and Zelda are underground, and you see like all this horrible stuff happening, and then it pans out like here's the underworld or a dungeon, and then you see the overworld after, like it pans out and shows like this relatively peaceful place with all this stuff going on underneath, and it's just it's a little bit interesting.
And right at the end, it's very subtly showing the castle rise with this mist under it. It's just like, what's happening? Yeah, it's a very intriguing prospect of what they're going to do with that game. Because if they go Majora's Mask dark with it, people are going to love it. Because not so much for the time looping elements. That's why some people hated it. My brother stopped playing because he hated the looping. But the going dark, people really appreciate a kind of family friendly, fun game going dark a little bit.
Right.
Not going too far, but going dark enough to where you're like, oh wow, like this is like a kid's horror game, and it's like, and it works.
Yeah.
And it works. So, because like there was like two really dark dungeons in Ocarina of Time, and I thought that went too far, because this is where all the executed people were buried.
I thought it was like crazy. Like I played it again recently, and just like the screaming that happens sometimes.
Yeah, the Re-Dead screaming to paralyze you, and it's like the stories behind those is just, and they're wearing wooden masks of their old face, or it's like, what the heck?
Jeez.
It's like, it's not entirely kid friendly, but it's vague enough to just be scary, and you don't know what the backstory is. The backstory just makes it like, geez, like who came up with this? But it makes sense in context of the story. But it's just like you're so used to these fantasy kingdoms being so happy and benevolent that this this is where the this is where the executed people go, like after when the royal family is is dissatisfied with them or something. Like there was some kind of like slimy underbelly of like, wait, what did the royal family have done with these people? It's like, and these are the torture chambers. Like, who are they torturing? Why? What foreign country are you fighting with? Like, the Gerudo are stuck in the middle of the desert by themselves. Who are you fighting?
Jeez.
Yeah, and so it's just like there's a lot of darkness going on over. That's why I brought up Undying Nephilim. And when he started making his story, all of this stuff kind of came to the surface, and I'm just like, now it makes sense, because what he's trying to do is like what I was talking about with Andrea is one person with a good vision making a thread from the beginning to the end, and he's trying to do that with The Legend of Zelda. It's just like, that's a tall ask, because you're talking about thousands of years of lore, and he made it into its own ages, and he actually has videos of he made cutscenes of these old wars and these old stories and this stuff, and he actually made it like you used to be able to play it when it was in a different game. I think it was in Total War or something, and then he ported it to a new game. I forgot what it's called. But the storyline is still the same, where you had all of these crazy old battles, and then it goes forward, and you've got this line of succession of the kings, and then you've got this line of knights and all this stuff, and you see Link, and he has a beard, and this is like, what's happening?
So this is a cutscene somebody made?
It's more than a cut. It's several cutscenes and half-hour videos, and like it really gets into all this stuff. And he's got 2 or 3 hour long podcasts where he's talking about these things and going into it. And he even brings up Pajot and going into symbolism and all these things. So he understands the culture war stuff as well, and he's trying to get into deep symbolism. But I feel like he goes a little too deep with it. But that's just me. I'm not a very deep person. I try to keep things accessible to people. And what he's doing with this story is making it into a coherent timeline in which everything makes sense. But still has the underlying story. But you get to a certain part where you played Twilight Princess, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you remember the Uka, the weird bird headed, the human heads on bird body people.
Human heads on bird body people.
Yeah,
I remember
They look like weird little chicken people. It's
oh yes,
freaky.
sort of.
Yeah. So imagine that, but they're actually extra dimensional beings who monitor time and try to keep everything ticking. And
I do remember those guys.
Yeah, and they're like an ancient civilization, and they have and they're sick. It's kind of like a flood scenario. They're sick of the people and all their wars, and so they decided to just go down and wipe them all out.
Mm.
And then and in the middle of all of this stuff, this giant, like, it's kind of like the Library of Alexandria burning down. Suddenly this huge library that has all the repository of all of the knowledge and history of Hyrule and all of these stories is burnt down and is like flooded over with this water because this big cataclysm thing happened. And um and in the midst of that happening, their leader, or somebody asked their leader, but what about all the books? And he and their leader looks at this woman and just goes, why bother saving them? It's all lies. This is like, what? Like, all of that history and all of those books, it's all lies? Like, yeah, all of it. Like, everything that you know about the history of Hyrule is wrong.
And so this is the story he makes to link it all together. No pun. I mean,
No, full pun intended, because Link is involved and his family is involved, and like and he's like the weird descendant of kings, and it's like, okay, does he take up the responsibility, or does he keep adventuring and saving people's lives? And it's just like, what? And there's so many layers to this. They even bring in that weird unrequited love from Ocarina of Time between him and um Rido, the
Farm Girl.
the Zora princess.
Oh, Zora. Yes.
Yeah, it's where they're like, there's clearly a history there, but you know, but he left her or something, and it's just like, what is going on here? I mean, like, I understand it and I approve, like, fully, because like there's clearly something deep going on here, and I want to figure out the dynamics going on of okay, who does Link actually who does Link actually end up with, um and continue this line with, because a whole lot of it, like, my storytelling, it's why I can't stand all of these superheroes not having kids anymore. My storytelling is based off of linearity and a continued and a continued story, because it's like the Bible. You can trace lines of lineages and and going through all of the stuff. And so it's like, well, if these heroes stop having children and stop modeling that, well, it's like, it's no wonder people aren't having kids anymore. It's just like,
Well, I mean, yeah. I think that I think maybe probably people try to mess with ideas, and then maybe it doesn't feel right for them, or it doesn't like, or it.
well, I think a lot of it was done wrong, like,
Okay. What do you think?
because
What do you think?
they would do, I brought it up last time. I have a booklet where you can see some of these really obscure heroes that were brought up in some of the Fantastic Four comic books. And some of these obscure heroes and villains were sons and daughters of many other prominent heroes and villains. And some of them, and I think what they did wrong was that they didn't show any they didn't show any passage of time. Just suddenly this person comes out of nowhere and they're their child. And and you're not sure what happened, or who the other parent is, or why they're attacking them, or what the angst is, or why they're helping, or where they come from. Like, there's no attachment between them, and it was all completely surface level, as it was just for shock. It's like, oh, here's this new character. It's like, oh, okay, I'm thoroughly shocked, but I have no interest, because it doesn't make any sense and it doesn't go anywhere. And then all of these sub characters that have popped out of nowhere suddenly disappear into nowhere, and you're not surprised.
Man.
Yeah. And so having a lineage of Link, depending on where that goes, because there's many ideas going on in the symbolism of what's going on in what he's trying to do, because he's mixing, he's taken a Western setting, which is medieval and fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
that is using Eastern philosophy, which is cycles,
Mm-hmm.
and then taking that and then stringing that into what I tend to call the straight spring, where it cycles but nothing is ever the same.
Mm.
And it, because that takes the cyclical thing into something that eventually ends but keeps moving forward, instead of seeming like it's the same thing all the time.
Okay, so the way I imagine it, so you have like a cycle, and on one, so it's link, link, and then you take the next one, and once it's like a different link and a different link, or different, it's just like
Yeah,
new iterations in the same, like, same form, but it's filled with different things, or new iteration on the same form.
yeah, but instead of it being the way that the video games are laid out, where it's just Link and Link and Link and Link and Link, it could be Link and someone else and someone else and someone
Right.
else and someone else, filling in the same spot, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not Link,
Mm-hmm.
if you know what I'm saying. So
So so in the Legend of Zelda, there is times where it's like it's Link, or it's the hero, or
yeah,
it's
because if you look at
some guy.
the stories of Link, they're all called Link, but each of them has a different hero name. They'll be called the Hero of Time, the Hero of Minish, the Heroes of the Four Swords. That kind of, they'll call them a different hero, the Hero of Ages, the Hero of Seasons. They'll call them a different hero, even though they're all called Link.
Right.
And so every time they're referenced in a different game, suddenly there's this weird timeline thing going on. That's why in Wind Waker, they reference back to the Hero of Time, and in uh, Twilight Princess, the shade that you fight is the old dead warrior
Yes.
that is the Hero of Time.
Right. The hero.
And
Right.
he had grown up and he had become a knight, and he had become a part of the royal guard and all that stuff. And you see him as the dead shade with the one red eye. It's like, dude, that was Link.
That's crazy.
The Link you played in Ocarina of Time. That's him.
Jeez.
Yeah, and so there's,
Oh
it's
man.
like
Wow.
all of the, suddenly these storylines that were nothing but this cycle have a linearity to them where they go forward. And it's like, whoa, you mean there was actually a past to this, and it's not just the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And some people would say, oh, it's always been like that. It's like, no, not really, because they kept doing the same thing over and over again. Here, there's actually an unambiguous timeline, whereas, just like I said with the beginning of it in Skyward Sword, where it's a generic hero killed, banished demise, and that's kind of where this all started. And it's just like, okay, that's a good start, but everything else seems to be the same thing over and over again because of the curse. Well, you get to the Hero of Time and suddenly everything seems different, because the Hero of Time is referenced. All the other stuff just says generic hero beats bad guy banished. When it comes to the Hero of Time is constantly referenced. And
Right.
in the
He's referenced in later games. Yeah.
in later games, and in the Wind Waker, the
Why?
cycle is broken.
Okay.
And that's weird to me, but the cycle is broken somehow, because the world at which the world that had been cursed, that kind of idea, I guess, had kind of sunk with Hyrule into the waters, and they had killed off Ganon once and for all, period. It's done. there's no more cycle. Ganon's not coming back. That's the idea. And so it's just Link and Zelda. And so but there's always going to be evil. So there's always going to be something to fight against. It's just Ganon's done.
So
but
that's in the Wind Waker?
That's what happens in the Wind Waker. The cycle is broken in the Wind Waker, and then you go through the other kind of, those are all the ones that were kind of done in that kind of toy style where he's got a big head.
Mm-hmm. Those are the newer ones, right?
Yeah, those are some of the newer ones. Yeah, that came out with the GameCube and the DS.
Yeah, like 4 Swords.
I don't know, but so with the Hero of Time, it's like if you were ever to say someone was Link, it's the Hero of Time. Period. Because that's where everything is solid. Ocarina of Time, if you looked at the whole timeline and went, okay, which one of these is most likely the true story? Ocarina of Time happened because it's referenced multiple times. That's how people do a lot of cross-referencing for history of what is mentioned the most, right. what has record, and what can cross-reference. And the one thing that cross-references is the Hero of Time. So that one happened. Okay. So building off of that,
I can buy that.
Seems to be the world that Undying Nephilim is creating, in which he has created a world in which the Ocarina of Time can happen and then did happen. But there's a dynamic there in which the events are not exactly what happened in the game. It's just that version of Link existed. And so you know that version of Link, who was the hero, who grew up, who was orphaned, whose mother took him from a war-torn area to the Deku Tree, who grew up with the Kokiri, who had all of this history with these people that he interacted with. That person existed. Even if any of the time travel things didn't happen. If none of the time travel happened, the rest of the adventure still happened. And so all of the sages and all of the people he knows are still there. Oh. So that's why he still has a relationship with Ruto. That's why he still has a relationship with Saria, and he still has a mentor in the kind of the Sage of Light, the Owly guy, and he's still a brother to Darunia, the Goron. It's all of these things. All of that is real. And then that moves forward, and they have the existential threats that come in every age, and that's the bad guy for the day. And then that moves forward regardless of whether or not Link is involved. Link's just the most famous hero.
Right. So, okay. So are you saying that the events in this timeline, in the games you played, like one objective thing could be the events that happened in Ocarina of Time?
Yes.
Okay. And then
the events dealing not with time travel. Mm-hmm. Everything else happened. Or at least versions of them happened, to the degree where he grew up knowing all these people and having relationships with them.
Right.
The rest of it is tales and adventures involving heroes and villains, and none of them are exactly the person that they say they are. They are just the projection put onto that story, because it's like telling multiple stories about Hercules. Mm-hmm. And it's like, he's involved in this story, and this story, and this story, and this story. It's like, yeah, but none of these ones happened. Yeah, but here's his story. We just put him in these ones because he's the generic hero that can do all of this stuff because he's really strong.
Okay, so why wouldn't the time travel had happened?
Because in context of the story, time ticks forward. So there can be manipulation, but it would always be ticking forward. The Uka, the ones that are kind of making sure that happens, would probably prevent reverse time travel. You might be able to go forward, or you might be able to slow things down a little bit, but that's still going forward.
Okay, so this is in the timeline where you've made it all work.
No, this is in the timeline that Undying Nephilim made it all work.
Okay.
I don't know any of this for certain. It just seems like this is what's going on because I'm seeing no time travel, none, in what's going on in his story. It's all ticking forward. So even if time travel is possible, it doesn't seem like it would be an aspect. Like
it is crazy to think about.
Yeah. It's like imagine having a limit to. It's like combustion engines. You can only do so much with a combustion engine, and eventually you get to the point where you're putting so many cylinders in a line, and you're not getting anything more out of it. And imagine doing that with time, where you can go a little bit faster or a little bit slower, but it's always going to go in one direction. You can't go backwards. So there's a hard limit, because there would be a huge break, and the Uka would not put up with that.
Okay, so when Link, so young Link goes through his adventures and the people he knows. So is it basically saying that the things that weren't the adventure in the Ocarina of Time happen? Like there's a historical link?
Here's the adventure that would have happened. Is Link going through his adventure to the point at which he's in the garden with Zelda, where she's telling him that she had a really bad feeling about this guy who's meeting with the king. And then
when was that?
That was near the beginning of Ocarina of Time.
Okay.
And so you've got to
that's when you do the Romeo and Juliet creep into the garden, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah. I didn't see that connection, but now I do. Thank you for that. But yeah, it's very much like that. And then the only person that sees you is her personal bodyguard, Impa. But who herself is a ninja, which
was that her? So that was her role model. That was who inspired her to be Sheik.
Yes.
Almost. Okay.
Yeah, she trained her in the Sheikah ways.
That's freaking nuts. That's cool.
Yeah. So she taught her to be invisible and to hide in plain sight, and because she's the princess, she cannot be captured. That's a bad idea. So that's one of the few games at which Zelda isn't captured until like the end. Because it's only later on when Ganondorf finds her and then puts her in a crystal or whatever, which is a very constant theme since I think the Link to the Past was put in a crystal, because the maidens were all put in a crystal that you had to go save.
Could that be something like Ganon? So Ganon's like a tyrant trying to put a restraint on like something like feminine, something that's supposed to be.
He is a tyrant. He is overbearing control. and that causes stagnation and decay. You see that in the town itself, where it just falls apart and there's nothing but redeads in the town.
Yeah, and
So
in the Zombie Ganon for more recently, yeah.
yeah, and so I'm the way I hope that they're going with that, with the Zombie Ganon, is that it's the aspect that was outside of him is the darkness, and the aspect that's being kept alive in the zombie wants to die. And doesn't want this anymore, and like wants to move on, because I prefer the storylines that moves forward, but that's just me. But the so the storyline would have gotten to the point where they're in the garden together, and instead of this wacky time travel thing going on, it would have been the king listens to his daughter's warnings about her dreams, and you see that in this storyline where the Zelda that is in these cutscenes that Nephilim put together has visions. Like, you can see her eyes glowing, like, and she doesn't know what's going on. So she's a bit of an oracle, and so she's trying to figure out what's happening. And so it's that timeline where she has visions where her father or her mother would have listened to her dreams and said, "Yeah, we need to not deal with this guy." And so Ganon doesn't get into the usurper position, and instead he tries to muster an army and then attacks them and fails. And then it moves forward from that.
Okay.
And that's kind of a baseline idea for a what if scenario, based off of what I know of Ocarina of Time itself, and of Neff's story. Where it would continue on as him as a kid, that's Majora's Mask. And so that and Majora's Mask technically happened. The thing that the problem with Majora's Mask a lot of people have is that it seems like it's a weird death state.
Majora's Mask?
Majora's Mask, a lot of people say, oh, he's in a kind of a limbo and he's trying to break out of it, because there's a lot of everything in that game has to do with death and moving on and passing on and healing and grieving, and there's a lot of these things. And but I honestly, I don't know if I agree with that, because while there's mirroring aspects and certain people look like other people and they have like the same names and all that, I think that's just because of the game mechanics. But that's not the way that Neff is treating them. The way Neff is treating them is that Majora's Mask is a limbo or a death state.
Yes, and I think that one is definitely more. I heard that one, and that one is definitely more interesting to me, or it is interesting. Just like it makes it much more. Like there's times in the game where, like, if you didn't know that, like, it's like kind of sad, but also there's times where he's like okay, so when the time starts to, when the song starts to speed up after the days goes on, once like more days go on, right?
Yeah, the time speeds up every day.
Yeah, and it sort of starts to feel like manic, right? Like, oh my god, like we're moving at 100 miles.
And that's because Majora is a chaos god who was summoned and then banished into a mask. Who tried to do this before. He tried to kill the world before like this. Because he just thought it was fun.
Okay.
And he is pure madness.
Yeah. And it definitely, okay, so that, I mean, given that is a like theology there, like it does make it seem a little less likely that it's just Link's afterlife, You know what I mean? Because that if it was Link's afterlife or a limbo, you would think it would just be like inside Link's head.
Well, and that's, see, what I would imagine it being is that they're both true, but it's Link in a near-death experience, because what happens at the beginning is that the Skull Kid steals his stuff, and then Link chases him through the forest and down this this hole, and there's a Alice in Wonderland sequence where he's falling through and he's seeing all these symbols and weird stuff's going on. So the way I imagine it is he fell into a hole and knocked his head, and this is his illusion going on. And him going through all this stuff and ultimately winning is him healing.
Yeah.
And while at the same time Majuro is real, so and it's trying to get in through his head.
So that's the so in your idea, like that's the opening for Majora when Link's having a, like when he's damaged for a second, when
he falls into the pit. That's him getting injured and hallucinating all of that happening, and then him winning his healing. But Majuro real, and he's trying to manifest in the world, and that's a bad thing, because as a chaos god, he's tried to do this stuff before, and he really is trapped in a mask. And the idea moving forward with that is that it failed. And he got through that, but he remembers all of it.
Right.
And so he's got that and the scar of it, and he would move forward as a little bit tougher. Like, he's been through a lot already, but he would be a little bit tougher, like, and understanding what real darkness looks like.
So it's a trial almost.
Yes.
That's what you see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Where like the Ballad of the Windfish in Wind Waker, not Wind Waker. Shoot, what is that? In Link's Awakening. In Link's Awakening, that is this, a similar thing happens, but it's less. But it's more obvious because they tell you it's a dream. Because in Link's Awakening, he's sailing in a storm and his boat gets struck by lightning. And then after all of the events of the game, he wakes up on Driftwood. And the only thing that was real of it, depending on how you play the game, if you like 100% the game or don't die in the game, one of the characters from your dream, from the Windfish, which is the only thing that's actually real, is the Windfish. Because it's sleeping. And it's this giant whale. It's that whale god that people say in some pantheons. I can't remember where it comes from, but it's a whale with wings instead of fins, and it's the island that he washes up on is the dream of the Windfish, and so he has to wake the Windfish up, and then he wakes up, and the only one that escapes from this is Marin, who leaves as the Windfish heard her number one wish, which is she wanted to become a seagull and see the world. And so she flies away as a seagull at the end of the game. And it's extremely heart-wrenching because, like, there's this like love story going on between Link and Marin through the whole thing. And like, it's just like with Ruto, where he has no idea what's going on. And he's just like really awkward through the whole thing. So
Link has this whole romance that he's unawares of.
Yeah, in a dream, that, and with someone who is completely fake, who gets born into the world as a seagull and just goes off and sees the world. Well, and it's like it's beautiful, but at the same time it's kind of like, okay, that's weird. but these are trials that he's gone through is as in hit it's so that's evidence for this kind of stuff happening before of he's been injured before and lived through a dream like this, because him suddenly being teleported into an alternate dimension that just happens to have the same people he's seen before seems like a little bit of a far fetch, because alternate dimensions doesn't seem like that much of a thing. Um, there's planes, kind of like there's a realm of the sages and a realm of this and a realm of that, but a whole dimension that has like people living their lives and doing all of this stuff.
Right.
It outside of being banished isn't really that much of a thing in The Legend of Zelda, because if you look through Twilight Princess, the people that live in the Twilight were a banished tribe. They were banished. That plane of existence is not meant to be lived in.
Right. In which one?
In Twilight Princess.
Okay.
And then people started drawing parallels, because at the beginning of Majora's Mask, it starts talking about this tribe that worshipped Majuro and summoned him and he ended up being put into this mask because he was banished into it. And every time you wear the mask, he starts entering back into the world. And the suddenly you hear the story about this banished tribe and these dark people, and in this Twilight realm, it's like, this is the banished tribe that summoned Majuro. It's like, okay, so clearly Ocarina of Time happened. Mm-hmm. The events at least leading to the lore of Majora's Mask happened. And Twilight Princess, in some aspect, at least involving the banned tribe, happened. So there's clear blocks of things that happened, and that's why he picked them out in these in this game he's making, this story where these things clearly happened.
Okay.
And the person telling you the story through his narration, from the very beginning, you recognize the voice because it's Midna talking in her strange backwards speech. And she's narrating all of the ages and what's going on, and it's the story being told.
Okay.
Through.
Okay, so this is in his Nephilim's?
Yeah, in Undying Nephilim's storyline, it's the story of the past, of the true past, being told by Midna. And so you're wondering, like, okay, so clearly present day, as far as that world goes, is something akin to Twilight Princess, because that's where the story is being told from.
Okay, maybe I can.
Yeah. So and that brings even more questions, because at the end of Twilight Princess, she severed the link between the two worlds, and by shattering the mirror. And so it's just like, okay, so then how does she know all this? Because and there was another dynamic between her and Link, and there's so many fantastic questions that could spring up from just hearing who's narrating this stuff that she shouldn't know.
Dude.
Yeah, it's insane, like what the breadth of this project, and he's been working on it for such a long time. I think maybe 2015. He's been working on it for a very long time, and that's only the game part. I think he's been working on the story and trying to hash it out. and he's even gone back and kind of changed some aspects of some of the past parts to try to make it all one coherent thing that feeds into what he's trying to do with symbolism, because he's
Okay.
so steeped in symbolism to the degree where there is a point at which you see Majuro in the mask as this person in a robe talking to the head Uka guy that failed, and him being extremely cryptic and laughing at him. It's just like, okay, this is getting creepy. It's really great. It's absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait until he's done, because it's going to be huge.
So he's trying to basically. So he's basically trying to find the events that actually happened because they're referenced in. He's basically like
He's
trying to find what he thinks were events that actually happened in.
he's making the most logical through line happen.
Hmm.
That's what he's doing. Like I don't know if he's thought fully through of what is historically referenced. I think he's taking what is most solid in storytelling. Like it's no wonder why he would start in an area where you would see not middle-aged, kind of young adult Link, maybe in his 20s, with a beard, who is a talented soldier, but still is a little bit cocky. It makes sense why you would start in there, because the game that started it all out, that had the most story like in it, told through the creation story, was Ocarina of Time, because they told you what happened with the three goddesses and the Triforce and all of that stuff. Everything was laid out. It's like, well, yeah, that's where you would start. You would start from the point of action at which you are with the most familiar hero. And then you would kind of tell the backstory, which is when you get into the old kings and the
Okay.
golden age, and that's where that's other stories that he's telling.
Okay.
And he even made those into some levels that you could play through and fight the old battles between the original Ganon, which was the big pig monster guy, who tried to invade because he was trying he wanted more, he wanted to save his people, and they needed more resources, and people wouldn't deal with them, and so finally he just decided to attack. And so it starts this big line of resentment, which is like clearly the through line for the curse. It's just like, it's not really a curse, it's just like they've got a grudge. It's like, here's a historical grudge. It's like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's I actually heard my brother and sister when I went in, so I had to grab the charger, or a charger, and they were talking about human nature, whether we're evil or good. And my brother took the position of we're bad by nature, and my sister took the Rousseauian perspective. And I was just walking through, I heard him talking about that, and then I was like, I just like real quick, I was like, well, we have potential for both. And I was about to walk out, and my brother's like, well, why do people do evil things then? And the answer that popped in my head, and I didn't say it, it was just resentment, like undealt with, like because I wanted to sort of give the answer like that was the most solid answer my mind could come up with.
It's a feeling of injustice, and when you pull in aspects of Christianity, it starts to explain the balance of justice and mercy, where if you got justice, someone's going to get hurt. Period. Like, there's a lot of suffering in justice. Justice is painful because it goes back and it sees what somebody did wrong. It exposes that, and then it punishes that. That's justice. Where you balance with mercy is, okay, we've exposed this wrong and we want to punish this, but we're going to let you heal.
Right.
And it's like, where does that come from? And it doesn't feel right initially. It feels unjust. If you let a murderer go, suddenly everyone freaks out. And it's just like, he could kill again. It's like, well, statistically, murderers don't actually do that. They kill once and then freak out for the rest of their lives that they took someone's life. It's like it's really hard to deal with mercy. Mercy is very, very difficult.
Well, I feel like people, like, my experience is there's an extent to which, like, if somebody does something you think is wrong, like there's an amount. Yeah, people do have an issue with mercy. And I guess being a good, like, I'm thinking of being a good father in life is just like towards, I guess, a father in a community, a father of the community is, or something like that. It's like being, it's like the harsh element of reality will hit you before it kills you. Like, and that's, I think,
hopefully.
Right. Right. And that would be like,
that would be a proper hero's journey.
Right. Right.
And of reality hitting you before your demise. That's a comedy. That's not a tragedy. A tragedy is it hits you before you figure it out.
Right. Right. And that's, I think there's an element of mercy in that, and people have a problem with mercy going beyond that. Like, oh, you don't have to, like, the murderer being let off, I guess.
Yeah. There's a book called Too Angry to Die or something like that. And it's a story about a or Too Nasty to Die, something like that. But it's a story about a guy that was a gangster, and he went to jail, and he did a whole bunch of bad stuff, and eventually he got saved. And then when he got out of jail, he started doing ministry and stuff, and he felt called to go back into jail. It's like, well, what's going on? And so he started to do ministry inside of jails and talking to people, and then he noticed a pattern. Is that they would ask for forgiveness, and they would get prayed for, and they would go through all of this stuff, and then they would go through a little group project where they had to write out everything bad that was done to them. And then when they were done, they couldn't go anywhere, but they had to think of each of the people that had wronged them and forgive them. And mentally, they wouldn't do it. A lot of them would not do it. They were like, "Oh, no, you don't know what they did to me. You don't know what they." It's like, okay, but if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. That's kind of a thing, and it's noticed. He noticed that pattern of some of the guys that were the worst off had no forgiveness. Like, they would not let things go at all. And it made sense why they kept getting back into prison. over and over again.
Man.
And because everything was done to them, they couldn't let it go. They couldn't forgive.
It's
and
true.
so it just made sense to him at that point. It's just like, man, now I know why people are evil.
Yeah.
They can't have mercy. It's like, man, I never want to be in that position.
That's a discovery, and it's even more of a discovery that, like, the conclusion isn't people are evil because people did bad things to them. It's people are evil because they can't forgive.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's more power there. Like you have more power there. Like you can do something.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in context of these games, Ganon could have stopped it at any time.
Yeah,
because he was the driving force. Everything else was an answer to him. At any point in any of these stories, if he would have just said, "No, I'm not attacking anybody. I'm not giving into this." At any time, it would have broken the cycle.
he wouldn't have been in. Yeah, I mean, yes, he could have, but then I think of how Mercury mentions, and something I've thought about is like he is this one, like he is power amalgamated into one thing.
Yeah, and he gets the Triforce of Power, which makes him even more
Megalomaniacal.
That, yeah,
Okay. Yeah, that was a little. Yeah.
he becomes a megalomaniac, even more so. So because he was already a sorcerer, because you see the stuff that he does without the Triforce beforehand. He gets this energy ball and he blasts Link with it, just to be a jerk. And the
Wait, was that when he was a kid?
yeah, when Link was a kid and he watched Ganondorf chase
Right.
chase Zelda out with Impa,
Away.
and he said, "Kid, where you saw another horse come out here? Like, where did it go?" And Link's basically a mute, so he doesn't say anything, and so he does, and he's like, "Okay, fine," and he just blasts him. It's like, well, you're not helping me out. I'm gonna be a jerk to you. I was like, okay, yeah. So and that's another thing that you'll notice if you go through the Nephilim stories is Link talks. And the first time you hear him talk, it's just kind of like, okay, because it's the mouth moving, text is being produced thing. There's no voices, unlike Breath of the Wild. But so he actually interacts with the world, and you see the hero in him, but you also see the hero's faults of being cocky, of like, I'm the hero,
like
I
jumping
win
into danger.
like, right. I always win. Like, that's the way he thinks heroism works. It's like he doesn't worry too much because he's always won.
Right.
And so when he gets knocked down, it freaks him out every time. It's like, how did I lose? Like, what's going on? And that dynamic doesn't go away until he loses a lot. And so that's like the dark side of courage. You can have because the way that they're depicted is they've got the Triforce of Courage, the Triforce of Power, the Triforce of Wisdom. Well, the dark side of wisdom is that you can become haughty and think that you know better than other people and treat yourself like a bit of a messiah figure. Well, that's what happens to one of the lines of Zelda's, because that's one of the things that he keeps is some of the names repeat, and there's been more than one princess Zelda, and so it's like Zelda the Third, kind of because it's a royal line. So that's kind of expected, and because Link's father's name was like Gustav or something. Um, the the the
Gustav.
the old Zelda, I think Zelda this second,
Hmm.
or I don't know, one of the older Zeldas, one of the more ancient ones, one of the more powerful ones, became what was known as the false goddess. So people call her Hylia, even though she's the aspect of Hylia. They think she's Hylia herself. Like that's not true.
Mm.
She
Mm.
so she and she loses her sight, and so she's blind, and she's on this floating golden throne, and the Wizrobes venerate her, and so she's got these sycophants who are extremely powerful wizards, and it's just like, okay, something's up here, and that's the dark side of wisdom, is that you can get too full of that,
Right.
and think that you know better. You might know better, but you think that you can use that knowledge um, to benefit yourself instead of others. And the dark aspect of courage that comes out in Link is that he is overconfident, whereas you would normally see. I think you turned your mic off.
Just for a second, yeah.
Yes, you would see normally in the games as he's being courageous, even a little bit naively courageous.
Yes, that's one thing I've always associated with Link, was being very sprightly in his courage, very like, even in the heat of battle he's like positive and like
He's a wide-eyed kid with a sword
right,
through
and that
most of the
ends up
stories.
he ends
Yeah.
up plunging himself into danger with a like a uh looking at the silver lining.
Yeah. But Ocarina of Time is the first time you see him like as an adult.
Mm, mm.
And so that aspect of him moving into him being an adult, you lose the innocence.
Mm.
And so now he's not naive, he's foolish.
Right, and it ends up like, it's probably that's why it's so surprising when Ganon just shoots him and he ends up falling.
Mm-hmm.
How did I end up here?
Yeah, it's just like, oh, like on one hand, like, okay, I got zapped, like that was, that hurt. On the other hand, how am I still alive? Because it's like you expect somebody to get zapped with like lightning or some kind of whatever that power beam was. That it's like stuff like that just seems extremely powerful. You expect people to be charred, but it was just like a force push or something, and like, you little bug, get away from me. But the you
Okay.
almost never see the light side of power in Ganon.
Mm.
And so you can see the light and the dark side of courage and the light and dark side of wisdom, but you almost never see the light side of power in Ganon.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like, how do you positively depict power? Well, it's hard to do that without a king, and usually the king in these stories is gone.
Right. Okay, so as far as just time goes,
Mm-hmm.
I probably got like maybe just like wrap up here like
Oh yeah,
in a second.
I thought you meant time in the games. I was like,
Dude,
Wait,
it really is so interesting. Like,
yeah,
if you want to, like, yeah, I'm game whenever. Like, if you want to talk more later, definitely.
yeah. I will see if I can put together a playlist
Okay.
of Neff's storyline.
Okay.
because he's got podcasts. The podcasts are like 2 or 3 hours a piece, where he kind of explains this stuff. But if you just wanted to, I don't know, enjoy the entertainment of his storyline, I'll put a I'll put a playlist together and see if I can get that into a coherent narrative, because he's very spotty with some of the information, and I don't know which ones are in what order, so I've got to watch them all and put them together like that.
Okay, for sure, dude. It's been really good talking to you, man. Like, I definitely have better knowledge of the Zelda timelines, at least, and Morrowind, and the and music and games. I could definitely talk to you, like, if you want to talk more about music and games.
Oh yeah. Bring in some examples, and we can go over those next time. And
for sure.
When you come across something, like, jot it down, and we'll go through that. Oh, I've got an idea of for the Neff storyline. We could do like Mercury's watch parties, and
dude,
and we can kind of record our reaction, because I don't think he would be offended with us recording that.
No.
With the analyses.
Okay. Yeah. And then I'll definitely, like, come up with I'll come up with, like, at least maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, like, samples of music in games, just like, and we can look at them.
Yeah.
Like, pick them apart.
And if you find anything that I didn't cover, like, if I didn't cover it, it's probably because I don't know about it. So So bring it up. If there's more examples of types.
Right, types of music.
Yeah. Like, totally. I'd love to hear it.
Dude, yeah, for sure. Dude, I will try and find that.
Man, so how